Hi, everybody. My name is Daniel. And
My name is Man Patel, and we are here to present our Canada Housing Data website.
yeah, so our whole approach to our housing solutions is that the housing market, we know that a lot of people are not able to have accessible information. So our domain is usually basically Canadian citizens, so they can have access to, information about the housing market from like the past 10 years. So it shows information where it has localized insight, data transparency, and civic engagement because Local's mission is towards having civic engagement, and we try to make our site accessible for that. So our whole situation is that we try to have information where it shows unprecedented housing prices. So it shows income transparency, data and data identifying gaps for building solutions. So what we have is here for About Me. What we did for our project is that we tried to have a mission to bridge the gap between data and housing solutions. And we have like our urgent information where we get all information from StatsCan and CHMC. So it reflects access for security and fairness. So this matters because our main mission is to have data transparency for everyone in Canada, not only just like people that are in the houses or people that are in CHMC. It's everyone in Canada. So this is what we came up with our team. So me and Mon, we did this. Mon will get you started with the national housing.
Hello, everyone. This is our natural housing data page. This page shows Canada housing construction from 2017 to 2023. Data comes from Stats of Canada and CMSC. So we focused on like Vancouver and four provinces like Ontario, Quebec, and Alberta and BC. So the first graph, like it shows the Vancouver annual housing starts. So this bar chart shows how many new homes were created, like were started in the Vancouver each year. So you can see in 2017, there were around 18,500 homes. By 2023, it increases to 25,500. So, but Vancouver population is growing by 45,000 each year, much faster than the construction. So that's why the vacancy rate is very low, only 1.1%. And almost of the homes built are condos or apartments, like 87%, and only 13% are single homes. Houses. So the graph too, the data visualization housing starts by province. Uh, this chart compares like the construction in like Ontario, Quebec, and Alberta and BC. So you can see the Ontario builds the most homes, about 90,000 in 2023, and Alberta had the fastest growth up to 41% since 2017. And Quebec builds mostly the rental, 68% of the new homes. And BC builds a lot, but homes are still expensive, 62% above the naturally average. So you can see the page. And, and yeah.
So our regional affordability stats came from like centralized metropolitan areas. So basically we're seeing Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, and Halifax. This is where we got information from StatsCan. In terms of our analysis, basically Montreal is a high income shelter to income ratio, where this ratio basically means if you have a ratio above 30%, then you have a lot of housing stress, right? So for these areas, you can see Toronto is the second highest, but Montreal has a lot of people where they have a lot of housing stress because their income goes a lot to housing. And the domino effect for the high ratios is because like reduced disposable income, delayed home ownership because it's harder for people to get jobs. I mean, to get a house if they're not having a job, and also intergenerational wealth gaps. So this is households in housing stress by province. So we have all the 10 provinces. So basically, this risk ratio has a methodology of terms of like if you're spending your income that has more than 30%, then you're in a tax bracket of like high ratios of housing stress. So most of your shelter cost comes from, property taxes, insurance. But if you're spending like more than 30%, that's very bad in terms of like your income and everything. So we have a regional breakdown in terms of province. So high housing process, high housing prices can, in terms of like stress, in terms of like Ontario and BC, because those housing prices are very high. So it can also have vulnerable groups in terms of like stress for owners of the housing and immigrant households. So it has a high ratio, and it also puts the implication of housing stress because, it's hard to afford a house if you're not actually paying for it, and it's obviously not good. And then we go down to mortgage burden and insurance rates by region. So this gets to provinces for insurance rates, and they're all high. They're all Ontario's the highest, but we're all, in between like 32% of high income for mortgage stress. So basically, when like I think the ratios in terms of like if you have a high insurance rate, your mortgage stress also gets high at the same time. So it kind of interplays together. This is like example of like a case study where, you know, basically a family home with income of 110,000 per year spends a lot of their money, spends like a nice like 30% per year on their house, which is not good. So these are the resources for, people all across Canada to get their resources. Whether you're a homeowner or whether you're renting, this is all for you. So we have our support services across Canada. We have information for that for our news page. And, we can take action because we also had a metric where we gave different provinces in Ontario where, if you're close to transit, you can have a better, transit livable community. So, for example, Ontario has, the TTC, for example, where a lot of places in Ontario have good transit accessibility places. So PEI, Newfoundland, and CI, and no, most of Canada has a lot of transmittal information and resources. We also have a lot of high vacancy rates for actual cities. So we use the metric for a source for like highest populated cities. So it gets Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, all the biggest cities, and it goes to show that there are a lot of rental capacity in terms of like strong job market and demand in terms of migration as well, where Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver are pretty high in terms of like vacancy rates because they're not able to support themselves in housing. And we have a line graph in terms of um property valuation trend where, BC is the highest and Ontario is the second highest because from 2021 to 2022, we have a lot of, vacancy rates where property valuations were like skyrocketed. We also have eviction filing density where, BC and Ontario are about, around 68% for eviction filings per density. And this also comes towards like our Indigenous disparity housing situation because one of the key issues for Indigenous is that because they have overcrowding and on and off reserve disparities where we want to give you the accessible information where anyone that's Indigenous will be able to understand their rights and understand that, they're not alone in this crisis. So we have in terms of like Indigenous housing needs where a lot of owners are selling, but a lot of renters aren't buying, right? So we have our owners that are very low in terms of like people wanting to get a house and rent, and it's kind of like a disparity between them. And we have Indigenous house. We got all the information from StatsCan for Indigenous affordability, and in terms of like a lot of them, which is 240,990, are spending over 30% on their shelter, which isn't good because we only have about 80,000 homeowners, right? So all of them are renting. And this is like the tenure for like how long in terms of, you know, like all the Indigenous people all across Canada. Um, we have like a million, but a lot of them only own houses rather than uh rent houses. So which is not a good, which is not a bad stat. And then the news, we have all our, news available for all the different information you can get through like our Stats Canada API. So wherever region you are, you're able to access our news and our resources for every site. So Stats Canada, CHMC reports, and tenant rights. So our housing policy in practice is basically our federal and provincial laws key housing programs and local implementation and challenges. So this basically asks our frequently asked questions as well. And
So
this is our, there you go.
this is our contact page. If you have any questions, you can contact our housing team through email and a form. We receive high volumes. We'll try to reply each of you, and you can contact us if you have any related questions. So yeah. And do you want to show the AI chatbot? Yeah. So for our project, we built a custom chatbot to answer questions about Canadian housing. So what it does, firstly, it checks if the answer like quickly uses common keywords that we trained, like housing data and affordability and indigenous housing. If the question is more complex, it connects to the Google Gemini AI, but we customize it to only give short and fact-based answers for like from trusted sources like CMSC and Stats of Canada. So Daniel, if you can write anything about like if you can type indigenous housing.
Yeah, I did.
So it gives you the answer, and also you can contact a team if the AI is unsure about that. Then one of us we can answer the query based on the contact form. So yeah, this is our project we have been working on past few weeks, and yeah.
Thank you so much for listening. All right, bye-bye.